Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Become an Effective Plant Maintenance Scheduling Pro, recorded in 2023. Our two speakers today are Graham Heiner from Engineering Industries Excellence. He is our European Delivery Manager for the Asset Management portfolio, and he is joined by Andre Kreutzwieser, a Principal Consultant at DivCon, a partner of engineering's for approximately the last 10 years. These two experts will take you all the way through how to improve your resource scheduling as well as outline a customer case for you. So I will hand the mic over to Graham.
So the agenda for today is broken down into four main areas. We're going to give you an overview of what we see as the trends in scheduling. We work a lot in this area, so we want to give you some insights there. Why scheduling solutions are needed. We'll go over the use case for Polmeyer, an organization that we implemented the scheduling solution in recently. We'll talk about that and how that went. And by the way, we do have permission from Polmeyer to talk about them today. And also, too, we will just go over in a little bit more detail the solution that was implemented in Polmeyer, the dynamic scheduling solution. So kicking things off, what is resource scheduling? So this slide is for anybody who just is not sure. It sounds obvious. What is scheduling? How you schedule something, but in a enterprise resource planning context, a large organization where there's lots of variables, lots of people, selecting a skilled resource actually requires quite a lot of smarts and computational power. So that's the first one. It's about selecting a skilled and available resource to complete the task. They have to be qualified, they have to be available, they have to be suitable, etc. So in a large organization where there's a lot of variables, a lot of people, we need something powerful to tap into that information. A resource scheduling solution also aims to minimize response time between the service request and the service completion. So there's an expectation from the customer or from your stakeholders on the level of service when an event is meant to take place or something is meant to be delivered by or installed by a certain date. And we want to essentially please our customers. So we gain a competitive edge if we're able to reliably carry out the service to our customers' expectations. And then the third one here on the right there is we want to maximize the resource utilization. So we want to ensure that essentially there's no wastage, minimize wasted time and minimize wasted material. So what we're able to do with this slide here, what it's showing us here is that from a large amount of information, we're able to keep our customers happy at the most economical cost in terms of human and material cost. So some of the trends in resource scheduling then. Here are 5 trends that we've selected that we think are topical at the moment. The first one here is that there is an improved availability of centralized information as people are exploiting their investment in large ERP systems, such as SAP. They might start out as sort of basic corporate services, HR, finance, procurement, this sort of thing. They get into maintenance. They mature in their maintenance practices, and all of a sudden we have a lot of variables that we need to calculate to work out what is the most efficient and effective use of our resources. So a lot of that with that centralized information, we don't want to leave any money on the table. We want to use that to be able to our benefit. The second one here is ease of use and user friendliness with a scheduling solution. A scheduling solution is not that much good if it's too complicated. You can't understand it, and it's not very user friendly. So having something with an engaging user interface and that is easy for the scheduler to use is critical, in our opinion. The third trend we're seeing here is that the software needs to perform very efficiently over large amounts of data. That's a little bit related to the first point here. The amount of information that's available for a scheduling software solution to analyze is growing exponentially. So the software has to be of a nature where it can deal with that. The fourth one is improved integration with enterprise resource planning systems such as SAP. This is about making sure that we can integrate with an ERP system like SAP in the simplest way so that there's no unnecessary complexity with the integration. And we don't want any integration problems. When we do our core patching with SAP, we don't want the interface to fall over and things like this. So having a very robust and elegant interface between the ERP system and the solution is critical. And the software, the scheduling software, needs to be able to easily calculate the resource dependencies and constraints. So again, this is where each scheduling solution has its own approach to doing this. And it's very important that for the efficient use of the software, that it can easily calculate all the dependencies and constraints. So some of the challenges from management then, and we've pitched this as W questions of resource scheduling. So now that we've gone a little bit over what resource scheduling is, what the trends, some of the current trends and drivers for resource scheduling, now we're a little bit prepared to think about these W questions of resource scheduling. And as we go through these will help us. We'll keep these in mind when we look at the rest of the presentation. So some of the things that are a little bit obvious that we ask is what should be done, who should do it, where are these when are these employees available? Many employees work different shifts and have different availabilities. When should and can the task be done? Where should the task be done? And is further work to be done there? What materials and tools are needed? And how much more revenue can I make in the customer service? So these are some of the things we want to bear in mind when we want to get the benefit of a resource scheduling solution. So one of the other points we wanted to make here is that the scheduling solution does not, the actual software itself does not exist in isolation, that there's usually some sort of business process behind the scheduling solution to support it. And in this example here, we provide an example of this, and we're able to provide advice around this if for any organization that is considering going on a scheduling journey and implementing improved business processes around scheduling, that the most effective method of implementing a scheduling solution is it being supported by a really good business process. So this is a asset management a business process here, a planning process here, where the organization, they do their annual budget. So their annual, that's your first cut for next year. What things we plan to do, how much will be capital work, renewal, and planned maintenance, and that will be the first estimate of what things can be done within your constraints and dependencies. Then the budget is released. You might structure it and set it up like a WBSE structure or something like that. That's that starts assigning accountabilities to different parts of the organization. So different areas will be assigned their budget and their work that they need to plan their work. Then there'll be a delivery strategy where over a certain period, so say if I'm a maintenance planner weekly, I will have some view on what percentage of work is planned and what percentage is unplanned. And then at the very end, this is where we're able to get closer and closer to the events and do our work order scheduling. And then as a result of the releasing the work order operations or tasks can then be scheduled and dispatched as the last thing. And you'll see as we sort of just look through this from top to bottom, it implies a kind of a hierarchy of planning as well. When you do your annualized planning, that's over a large period. And as we get closer and closer to when we do our scheduling and dispatch, the planning horizons reduce in time frame, and we should be able to predict with much better accuracy the right schedule for the task. So one thing we need to bear in mind then, on the last slide there, we looked at the business process that would be in place to support scheduling resources. Who can optimize your resources? So in some cases, centralized scheduling is best for more repetitive tasks. So for something where there's not much variation between the tasks, it's a very set task. That could be a good candidate for much more centralized scheduling, because that's where most of the knowledge is on about optimizing your resources. But not all scheduling problems fit into this category. So there are other types of work, like certain types of maintenance or trade work or something like that, where a lot more of the knowledge is localized. So the point here is that not only do we have a good business process to support our scheduling, we also take into account whereabouts the knowledge is to optimize the work, because that will affect what kind of scheduling policies that we put into place. So, for example, a more centralized scheduling, that might be something where you instruct and feed the work quite prescriptively to the resource. But other types of work like trade work, electricians and that sort of thing, where there's a lot more sort of uncertainty at a local level around the work and what needs to be done to optimize, well, then they might be given more of what could be called like a backlog of work. So and then they get through that backlog in their own way. But what the important point with that is that we're taking into account what is the best method to optimize resources. Some of the knowledge might be centralized, and some of the knowledge might be local as well. So at this point here, I will hand over to my colleague from DivCon, Andre, and he will take us through the actual solution and the use case for us. So thank you, Andre.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Graham, and thank you for having me. So let's have a look into the solution now. So dynamic scheduling, that's a software component. As we heard, it's mainly used for scheduling resources. And it's a component which is connecting against SAP systems. So it can be a classical SAP ERP system. We also support S/4HANA. The customers can install it on-premise at the customer side, but we also have a cloud edition, basically, where we connect the cloud with the customer's ERP system. So both flavors are possible. And the solution consists of 4 different components. You see them on the slide. Let's go from left to the right. So on the one hand, we have the dynamic planning. That's one of the components which are used by our customer Pollmeyer, which we'll see later in the demo. And that component, dynamic planning, is used for plant maintenance scenarios. When the technicians stay in-house, they stay within the plant, basically. And the schedulers need to schedule those kind of activities like repair work, maintenance, inspections, which are basically done in-house. So the solution mainly then consists of a Gantt chart where you can do the manual planning. You could even do automated planning, considering information like availability of technicians, priority of orders, and qualification of the technician. The second component is dynamic map. That's now mainly used for a customer service scenario, where the technician really travels on site to the customer. For example, the classical case is that, for example, you're producing washing machines, sell it to the customer, and the customer calls you because there's a failure basically, and the technician needs to travel on site and needs to do the repair work. So that's mainly where dynamic map comes into the play, because it contains all of the information or functionality within dynamic planning, but on top of it, you have the possibility to plan on a map, which gives you possibilities like doing route planning, route optimization. You can try to reduce travel time and those kind of things. The third component, that's also a component which is used by the customer, Pollmeyer, is dynamic capacity. That's more used for the high-level planning. So the difference to the previous two components is really those components, they plan on a resource level, on an employee level. You directly say, okay, Mr. A, B, C needs to do the job, but in dynamic capacity, you do it on a higher level. You see, for example, as a planner, how many orders are available for July or for August. You see also how much capacity do you have in your work centers. And then you can gain a lot of information about it. Is it sufficient capacity which you have? Do you run into a bottleneck so that you maybe need to shift orders to the previous month? Or maybe you need to assign certain orders to another work center which should support you because you don't have enough capacity. Or maybe you need to hire some additional technicians or need to use external companies to support you. So you can get a lot of beneficial information out of it. And I will also show you later in the demo what you can do with it. The fourth component is dynamic utilization. As the name says, it's about utilization. So that's a kind of reporting dashboard which shows you the utilization of either single persons, single technicians, or your whole work center. Differentiated into labor time, travel time, for example, overall utilization, those kind of things. So it also gives you really important information because, of course, as a planner, you would like to utilize your resources in an optimal way. So let's go to the next slide. And yeah, what kind of benefits, added value do you get out of such a scheduling solution? And first, yeah, you have a kind of cost reduction because let's take the example where a technician is really traveling to the customers. And if you are able to optimize your route planning, of course, you can reduce travel time. You can reduce kilometers. Based on that, you can reduce gasoline, and it has an impact onto the costs. But there are also a lot of other examples for that. Second, you have a reduced workload in the back office as a planner because you have all information available at a glance. Yeah. Some of our customers, they are running in SAP, but then they have to export order information into a spreadsheet, for example. In the spreadsheet, they then do the planning. And of course, that's something where you do some double work. It's not an efficient way. But using a scheduling solution, you have everything in one place, which really reduces the workload. Third, you get a higher level of transparency because, as mentioned before, you have in one view, you see your orders, you see your technicians, you see their availability, and then you can make an optimal planning without jumping into different systems to collect all of the information. Then you can increase technicians' productivity because you have better planning options. I mean, a very nice example is, I mean, if you do some planning, you can run an optimizer, which maybe finds some gaps in the planning or can reshift some orders that the technician, for example, can handle one more order per day. So that's then really increasing the productivity. Or if you look into a customer service scenario, based on the route optimization, we can reduce travel time, which gives you more space for, let's say, productive work, like really working on the orders and doing the repair or maintenance work. The next point also comes especially from the customer service scenarios, fewer second visits. So a lot of our customers in the past had the issues that the technician is traveling on site to the customers. He traveled 100 kilometers. And then he's starting to make the repair work, but at a certain point in time, yeah, he cannot continue because some spare parts are missing. And that's a very important point because we don't only plan the technicians when to be on site. It's also important to ensure that the technician has all information available, basically, like material. And we can include, for example, the material availability into the planning process, just to ensure that all needed materials are available, they are prepared for the technician, and we can be sure that he has everything in place to do the job. The next point is more up-to-date data and better reporting. The nice thing here is, and especially if, for example, you use a mobile application, right? On the one hand, you are planning the technician, he's then doing his work. And if he has a mobile application, he can report information like, I started with the order, I completed the order. He can report back time or material confirmations. And all that kind of information could be included also into the planning board. So, for example, that for planned orders which are completed, we see them in a green color. And then you see on one look, basically as a planner, okay, that everything is completed. The last point is higher customer satisfaction through fast response times. Of course, that's all our goal when we have to deal with customers. And this also comes then from the customer service scenarios where, for example, the customer is calling you because the washing machine doesn't work anymore. Then with the planning or with our planning solution, you directly can look, okay, which technician is available, which is the closest technician to the customer, to ensure that in a very fast manner, the customer receives some help, and you can directly make an appointment booking, and the customer exactly knows when he can expect someone visiting him on site to do the repair. That's all valuable and additional added value. But now let's have a look into a real customer case. So the customer is called Pollmeyer, and they are a large manufacturer of sustainable timber building products, which, for example, are used for house building or for furnitures. And in order to fulfill the needs of their customer, they have to deliver on time for customer projects and customer orders. And of course, there's also a bit of competition on the market, so they have to perform really well in order to keep their position on the market. And from a scheduling perspective, they have two flavors, I would say. On the one hand, they have to make a long-term planning. That's mainly for maintenance work, which you can plan on a monthly or quarterly basis, basically, where they really see, okay, how much orders can we expect in the next quarter or in the next month? How much capacity do we have in our work centers? Can we still handle it? Otherwise, we need to reshift or to take any action. And that's a rather long-term planning. And of course, it can always happen that a failure occurs, a machine cannot operate anymore as it should, and that's those kind of critical orders which have to be handled very, very fast. And of course, also those kind of urgent emergency ad hoc orders need to be planned somehow in order to avoid production stops or to keep it at least low. Here we see an overview about the production process. I mean, I don't want to go into too much detail here, but let's have a look at the right side. On that graphic, you see the timber as it would come from a wood, let's say, right, from a forest. And this timber basically run through a production process consisting of several steps until at the end of the day you receive it in a shape which you could use for house building or furniture and other things. And it's very important that that kind of production process runs in a smooth way, because if you have one failure in one of those steps, it has an impact on the subsequent processes. So from a maintenance perspective, you really have to keep an eye on it, and you need to ensure that the assets are operating in a good way. So what were the challenges from Pollmeyer so far? So historically, they received a great pressure from the production because in the past they did not do enough preventive maintenance. This led to a situation where they really sometimes ran into failures which had to be fixed or had to be fixed very, very fast. And that's also where they wanted to get rid from it, just to really look more into the preventive maintenance, of course, which has to be scheduled in a smart way. Then the resource scheduling was not digitalized. So, for example, they used a spreadsheet, Excel, for that purpose, which is, of course, not ideal. As I mentioned before, right? You have to export data into the spreadsheet. Maybe you have to put back some data from the spreadsheet into SAP. That's really, really time consuming, and the integration into your ERP system into SAP is missing. Based on that, you also have a lack of transparency because you don't have a kind of 360 degrees view where you see who is available, right? Who is qualified to do the job, yeah? Like you have it on a Gantt chart, for example, in our solution. Then, they also had issues where orders were planned, but the material was not available so far, so they had to stop orders. And as I mentioned before, you could also include the material delivery or the material availability process into the planning. And they also did not have an overview about an order execution status because they also they already have a mobile solution in place. It's very, very nice to integrate into the planning board that based on certain statuses reported back by the mobile device, we could show completed orders, for example, in a green color, or orders which are in progress. They could be highlighted in yellow, for example, which is really nice for the planner because based on that kind of visual indicators, he gets a really, really good overview about the current planning. All right, so far so good. Let me jump into the demo now. I would like to show you two components now, directly out of the quality system from Pollmeyer. And first of all, I will jump into the role of the capacity planner, which needs to ensure to check, okay, which orders are in the pipeline, basically, what's the capacity I can offer in order to execute or handle those orders, and then try to bring it into the right balance, basically, that we can always ensure that the orders can be fulfilled in time as they are planned. And what you will see is also in the demo then is that I have a week, for example, a calendar week where we have an overutilization. So it's impossible to handle that amount of work orders in that particular week. And I will shift then certain orders into the next week in order to keep the right balance. So let's have a look into that. So that's the dynamic capacity component for the high-level planning. And when entering the application, I get this entry screen where, first of all, I need to select for which work center do I want to see the planning, respectively, do I want to make the planning. So let's have a look into that mechanical work center. And as a second step, I will need to specify the time frame for which I want to see the orders and the capacity. So let's take this kind of time frame for a long-term planning. And then I'm entering the main screen, basically, which consists of three different areas. So the first area is the demand area, which is a Gantt chart. I will show you in a second in more detail. The second part is the capacity, the work center area, where I see, okay, how much capacity do I have? And based on my planning, how much utilization do I have? And at the bottom of the screen, we have the demand list where for all of the orders, you can get some additional detailed information. And we are basically free to customize which column, which information should be displayed. Let me hide two of them and let's go from the top. So in the demand list, first of all, we see the work centers, which where I can do I can make the scheduling. And if I expand it, and that's really Pollmeyer specific, on the second level, before seeing all of the orders, they would like to see, okay, what kind of orders do we have? They differentiate between three different types. So the planner should know, for example, here, those orders, they need to take actions regarding fire protection, fire security. Yeah. The second one is those are orders which you have to make without any interruption, which means if you start with it, you really, really have to complete it. So you cannot stop it and continue at a later point in time. That's, for example, the case when you would when you would exchange an engine, for example, yeah, you should complete it, because otherwise the machine cannot operate. So you really have to bring it to an end. And the third part is, those are the orders where you can have an interruption, basically. Let's say if you do some cleaning work and so on, it doesn't matter if you stop it and maybe continue 1 hour later. Yeah. So, but that's for them, from a planning perspective, important to know. And if you have a bit of further look into the Gantt chart, now you see, let's say for calendar week 23, you see first orders which are planned or were planned for that calendar week, and they have 2 different type of colors. And that's again important information for the Pollmeyer planner to know. The orange ones, those are orders where the machine has to be stopped. So it should not be in operational mode, right? So it really has to be stopped in order to fulfill the maintenance work. The green ones, the green orders, those are the ones where the machine can continue running. Basically, you don't have to stop it. So that's work which does not interrupt the production process. So you see then also that the order with the short text, you see, okay, in which, when is a basic start date, basic end date, in which time frame should it be executed. If you expand it a bit more, you also see the operation level, how many operations are below it. And then you can also plan those kind of operations. But in the Pollmeyer case, they really plan typically on the order header level. That's the weekly view. If you would like to make rather even more higher level planning, you could also change the view. You could go to a monthly view, for example. Now we see June and July. You could go to a quarterly view, yearly view, and so on. So there's a lot of possibility how to handle it. If you make a right mouse click on an order, you have several functionalities available. For example, you could set a status for that particular order. Those are the user statuses from SAP. You could view and edit or add some long text for that particular order. Here we see what should be done. I could also add some additional long text. I could also change the dates on the order level or also on the operation level in order to make, in order to adjust the scheduling dates. And the last one is I could even shift the order, so that I say, okay, I would like to shift it, let's say, by 7 days, meaning 1 week into the future, or maybe more to the a previous date. So that's basically the demand area, basically consisting of the Gantt chart. Let me show you the second part. That's the capacity view, the work center view. And what we see here, since we are now in that weekly view, we see here my work center. I could again drill down basically to see how many utilization do I have when the operation should be, the asset should be stopped or not. But I think on a work center level, it's now sufficient. And here we see, you should also see when I have the mouse basically on that bar, I see that I have 75 hours of capacity available. So for that particular week, so that's basically the capacity based on my technicians of the work center. And we already have a planning of roughly 12 hours, which gives a utilization of 16%. Based on that, it's highlighted green. Everything looks fine so far. So we are in a good shape. So if I scroll to the right, everything green so far. Here we see in calendar week 24. Oh, we are in the yellow area. That's also something you can really define customer specifically when or which color should be displayed based on which utilization degree. So for example, in the Pollmeyer case, when you run into an 80% utilization or above, it turns yellow. So here we have 91 hours utilization. We have 110 hours of capacity. Here, for example, it gets more critical. So it turns red. Why? Because we have an overutilization of 113%, where we have 125 hours of orders to be executed and only 110 hours capacity. Yeah. So this gives you really a very, very good overview. And I will show you later on in that particular calendar week where we also have an overutilization, how we could shift it and try to solve this kind of planning issue. Let me show you the third area. That's the demand list. And that's really, really nice because you see all relevant information basically which are needed. You could really customize it. Here where you can change the columns, you can define filters, you can define some sorting and so on. So you can really make it on a user level. Furthermore, you can search, for example, for orders. Like here, I search for an order number, then it directly finds it and picks it. Or if I search, for example, for a machine name, resource, you see all orders, all of those where resource is a part of it. So you can basically search by all criteria which are displayed here. Furthermore, if I have not the possible, or if there's really too much overutilization and I cannot shift it to other weeks, I could select the order here. I could make a right mouse click. I could then go here and say change the work center, and then I could also put in another work center, which can help me out in that particular case in order to solve my capacity bottleneck. We can have quick filters like here based on the priority, where you could just display the priority where we have fire protection or without interruption. So a lot of different possibilities in there, Excel exports and so on. And the nice thing is, if you select, for example, if you make a double click on one of those orders, it's on the one hand highlighting the particular order on the Gantt chart, and on top of it, you get them highlighted below in the list. So that's a very smooth and smart way in order to keep the overview. So now let's have a look, right? I mean, I'm a capacity planner, and one of my main tasks really is to ensure that we can handle the orders in a smart way. Now here in calendar week 30, I have a capacity issue, but in calendar week 31, it's really looking nice because we just have 10 hours planned so far. We have 100 hours left. So let's shift some orders into the next week. And I could really do it here by drag and drop, basically. I could start shifting around. And what I see here now is that the utilization is decreasing here now, and here it's increasing. Yeah, and I could then really try to get that into a good shape. I could also select multiple orders here if I would like to do so. But now let's see, we have 60 hours now. Here we run into 136, so we still have to shift a bit. Now we see here we come into the yellow situation. Now we have an 80% utilization, but still we are red in the previous week. So let's shift one more. And if you look now, we are in a really good situation because both work centers have a good utilization without being overutilized. 80-30% here, 94% there. So that's a planning which looks good. And I could basically go ahead. Yeah. So let's save it. So that's the dynamic capacity for the high-level planning. What I would like to show you now is how it looks when you make the more granular planning, meaning now you need to decide as a planner, okay, who should basically do the job? Because here we really just say, okay, that's my work center, those are the orders, but I don't say which technician should do it at the end of the day. I just do it here on a work center level. So now let's jump into the second component, which is used by Pollmeyer, which is the dynamic planning. So not the map, because Pollmeyer is just doing the maintenance work. So they don't need a map integration. Therefore, they use dynamic planning. It looks really, really similar. We select, okay, for which work center do we want to make the planning? Which time frame do we want to consider? Then I execute. And what I can see now is I see a screen consisting of 3 different areas. So on the one hand, we have the resource tree, which shows me, okay, which technicians are assigned to my work center. I see, for example, let's expand Marcel, which days are planned for him, where he has already some orders, what's his availability on that particular day, how much work is assigned to him. If we would operate in a customer service scenario, we would also see the travel time, which is calculated, which then gives here an indication about the overall utilization. So that's a resource tree. And on that tree, you also have several functionality available, which you could use as a planner. But I don't want to go into too much detail here on the resource tree. Let me also hide it now. The main part here is the Gantt chart. Let me scroll, for example, here to that area where we already have some planning, and you see different colors in the planning, which shows you green means, okay, the order is already completed. Yeah, based on the status, it's highlighted in a dedicated color. The blue ones, they are scheduled so far, they are not completed. That's the reason why they are blue. Furthermore, what you see on the Gantt chart, you see those kind of white spaces, you see also the gray spaces, and that's information which directly comes out of the SAP HR system, human resource system, because their working plan is assigned to the technicians. And based on that, we see when they are available and when they are not. And based on the fact that they don't, or they have different availabilities, this means they are typically working in different shifts, for example. Yeah. So here, for example, Marcel is starting at 6 in the morning. Then from 8:30 to 8:45, he has a bit of break. And he's working until 2 o'clock, basically in the afternoon. Then, yeah, he's done with his work. Yeah, when you have some orders basically, or some assignments done here, I mean, if you hover over them, you also see some basic information. That's also something which is really customizable at the in the system. Plus, you can customize which kind of functionality do you need when you make a right mouse click on those kind of assignments. And so, for example, you could see assignment details, where you could also change the planning dates. You could delete the assignment. You could, for example, also set a status, yeah, where you would say here, that's done. If I click it to done, now it's red. Sorry, green. You could jump into Planning Assistant. I will show you later on what's behind it. And also here you can access the order long text, operation long text, and so on. So let me save that particular change here. And in the bottom, we also, again, have the operation list with similar functionality where you can search, you can export it in the spreadsheet and so on. Interesting to know is here, for example, you see those kind of green graphics. That means for that particular operation, that's already scheduled, that's already planned. So if I make a double click on it, it jumps into the right place in the Gantt chart, and and highlights it, and you see that one already is planned. The other ones, they are not planned so far. So let me show you a bit of planning. And I will start with a manual planning. Manual planning means you can basically plan whatever you would like to plan. So because in the automated planning, we have some logic behind it, where you can, yeah, I will show you later on, where you get a bit of assistance and help so that you don't make a wrong planning. But now let's start with the manual planning. So I have some orders prepared which I could use, and let me plan for the same week which I showed you previously in the capacity planning. And what I could do now is I could drag and drop those kind of orders onto the single technicians. And you see it's directly creating an assignment. It also detects that the planned duration for that particular order operation is 2 hours, and based on that, it plans it from 6 o'clock until 8 o'clock. And similar to that, I could really do it also for other operations. I could also select multiple operations and drag and drop them onto the Gantt chart. Let me put one more to another resource, and let me take a last one. Let's put that, for example, to the next day. So I did some planning there. It's not an optimal planning, right? Because normally I would just try to fill out the gaps or the gaps in between, but I will show you later on how we can get rid of them. So what's typically happening when you do some planning, right? Now I have my initial planning, but what could happen, for example, is that, one order takes more time, right? 2 hours, for example, is not sufficient. So what I could do is I could just enhance the duration by, again, drag and drop it, yeah. If it turns out that one order doesn't have to be executed, yeah, I could also, for example, delete the assignment like I did here. If Marcel doesn't have time in the afternoon, for example, here, I could also shift it to Benjamin, for example, who could do the job. So I'm pretty flexible in order to make the planning. Let me save it just in the meantime. All right. What can also happen, for example, is that a technician fell sick, right? And in that case, I need to make a replanning. So let's say Benjamin here falls sick, and he's calling me in the morning of the 25th and telling me, hey, Andre, I'm sick, right? Cannot come to the office. Could you please plan my orders to somebody else? And what I can do here is I can directly make a note. So that's a time allocation, and that's also customizable, where you can have several kind of categories. So sickness, for example, meeting, training, and so on. In that particular case, he's sick, which is an absence, and I could say, look, he's sick from 6 o'clock in the morning, the whole day. His shift would go until 5 o'clock. If I grade it, what you can see here now is that he's absent, but he still has one order which was scheduled for him. So I would need to plan out his day to somebody else. And what I can see is that Marcel, for example, he's available. And on the 25th, Benjamin, I could drag and drop it to Marcel. For the 25th, I could say, hey, look, initially it was planned from 8:18 to 10:18. Let me try to make it as early as possible. And it detects, oh, Marcel is starting at 6 o'clock in the morning. For the 2-hour job, we can plan him from 6 to 8. So if you then confirm it, what we can see here basically is that this one was reshifted to Marcel 6 o'clock until 8 o'clock, which is good. So this was manual planning processes. What I showed you, or what we can also do is to have some some automatic planning processes, which means I get some validations if my planning makes sense. So for example, if Marcel is working from 6 to 8 and I will try to plan at the same time something to him, it will tell me, hey, look, it doesn't make any sense, right? I mean, he cannot work on 2 orders in parallel. So the order is until 8 and it could start afterwards, right? Or if you would say, hey, look, that order, it should start in the weekend or during night, but you already see that he's not available here. If I put it in there, it would automatically shift it to the next available date, for example, right? Or if I schedule him at 1:30 something, it will see, hey, he's not available. It's not sufficient time. When is his next available time? And here we go, right? It puts it to the next available time. So there's a lot of possibilities in order to do some optimizations. Another good example is if we look again on the 24th, so Marcel is starting the workday at 6, but his first job starts around 8, right? Then he has a gap, and at 11 something, there's another job. I mean, from a planning perspective, it actually does make sense because we want to assign as much as possible orders to him. And that's something we could do to optimize, right? I can click on Marcel. I could go into a wizard and tell the wizard, hey, please optimize the 24th of July. We have 2 orders, then make an optimization. And what you see here now is the initial planning was starting at 8 with gap, but now the initial planning starts, or the new planning starts at 6, and we don't have a gap. So he can really, or we can really utilize his available working time as best as possible. So there's quite a lot behind it, which you can use. You could also, for example, select several orders. You drag and drop them onto the Gantt chart, and then they are automatically planned. You could even make a fully automated planning so that you don't have to do anything else, right? So as soon as a new order is created, basically the algorithm will check what's a suitable resource, which resource is available, basically. Do we need to shift around some orders based on priority, and then could make the corresponding planning. But this now should just give you a quick overview, basically, what is possible. Here we also see that there's something turning red. That's our alert monitor, where you can see information like success messages, information messages, or if something turns or goes wrong, you also get the error message, basically. So let's delete those and let's save the overall planning. So that's the Pollmeyer case. In the plant maintenance sector, what I would quickly want to show you is how it would look like on a map. So that's directly in our own test system, basically. In the map-based planning, here we go. I will quickly hide the map. And let me jump to our current date. Sorry, let's go here. And what you see, for example, is if you start tracking and dropping things around, is when you do it on the Gantt chart, you see the travel time, the travel to the job and traveling back to the office or traveling back home. So that's the first difference which you see. So when you do some planning, that it's automatically calculating the travel time. Let me save it. And what we can see for Manfred here on a 3rd of July, if I click on it, let's have a look on the map. We see that there's a route for him. So he's traveling first to that order. Afterwards, he's going to that order, and then he's traveling back to his location. And I could really do a lot of things on the map, basically. So, for example, that's the home location for Manfred. I will now make a route which is not optimal. I will send him to Heidelberg, then to Heppenheim, and then back to Bammental, which doesn't make sense from a driving perspective. So I can really drag and drop directly on the map. Let's say, let's plan him for tomorrow, July. Here we go. Now we have him here on the 6th with an easy map, just one place, which he needs to visit. But now let's also assign him that order and that one. And now we see that he's planned for that particular day. He has 3 orders. First of all, he's traveling here, then again to the other direction, and then again to the south, which really doesn't make sense. And with our route optimization, we could really optimize that. So I will go into the wizard. And what we see now here is that he has a overall utilization of 99.47%, working utilization 66%, traveling time is quite much with 32%. If I run the optimization, it's now what you see here below, it's shifting around the orders, which at the end really is reducing the travel time. So we see that the initial travel time was 32%, and based on the route optimization, we could bring it down to 24%, which is really, really nice. Just as a little example, how in a customer service scenario, we could do some planning. So far, so good for the demo. I think I have one slide left. So let me jump back to that one. Exactly. Just to summarize that. So at the end, Pollmeyer took the decision, right, to use dynamic capacity for the high-level planning, dynamic planning for the low-level planning. And why did they choose for our solution? So they really liked that we offer a capacity planning and a resource scheduling, so the low-level planning in one application, basically. So there are solutions out in the market which offer just one of those two. Then they really had the feeling that the usability is really, really good and it's easy to handle. They also had the freedom to decide if they would, run the solution in the SAP GUI or in Fiori. What I showed you today was the Fiori flavor, but we also have the possibility to let it run in the SAP GUI. Then they really have some additional plans from a planning perspective. I mean, what I showed you was the integration into the plant maintenance system, but dynamic scheduling offers also integration into customer service, into the project system and PP. And for them, this was really important because they also have some scenarios in mind with PS and PP, where they can use our solution. Then it was important for them that the solution is sub-certified and that it could also be integrated with a mobile solution, which they already have. So I hope that you got a bit of introduction how it looks like in the real world in a customer scenario. And thanks a lot for paying the attention. And yeah, I can give it back to you, Graham.
Thank you very much, Andre. That's great. We have a couple of questions here we need to go through.
So the first question from the audience that we have for you is what's a good first step? How can businesses get started with solutions like this?
Maybe Andre, you can take this one.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, basically, I mean, what I can recommend here is to pick out a dedicated process, right? Like in a plant maintenance, for example, in a dedicated department. And where we make good experience really is to make like a proof of concept, a POC, where we take a scenario which is really, really close to our standard application, where you have the possibility really to make a fast implementation, where you get your hands on the solution really, really fast. And based on that, you can get some experience. You might find out some gaps where you say, hey, look, I would also need that kind of functionality, but that's what you could put on top of it. But the nice thing is that you keep it in a slow or in a small area. You get your experience. You get used to the application, and as next steps, yeah, you can enhance the application and you can roll it out then also to additional users. So that's a good approach how you could start.
Yeah, and I'd probably add to that one, Andre. That's a great suggestion. I'd add to that one, and you kind of mentioned at the beginning anyway. Is I'd also recommend like mapping out the business process to support this. That's usually a good way to sort of get everybody on board and to get the flow of the business process going, because it will be a continual sort of a flow, and it'll kind of become a lot more obvious to everybody how the solution can support the business process.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. The next question is, what if you have technicians that work as a team? Can you use DivCon's software to schedule groups like that?
Yes, that's also possible. So in the application, you have the possibility to build a team. So you could really decide, okay, in which time frame do you want to have the team up and running? So let's say for a particular week or for several days. Then you can also define a team lead, basically who is responsible for the scheduling. And yeah, you can assign team members basically. And when you plan orders on the team, it directly has an impact onto all team members because it also copies that kind of planning from the team level to the resource level, basically to the team member level. And then they also get that kind of utilization and planning. Yeah. So very nice thing, because I mean, let's assume you have a team of 3 or 4 people. You don't have to plan each order or operation on each single team member. You just plan it on the team, and then it's automatically considering that all team members are planned automatically. So it's possible.
Okay. The next question I have here, is there any technology that is required to have before you can implement a solution like this?
Technology which is required, not really. I mean, that's a nice case, because the application is directly running in SAP, right? I mean, yeah, as I said, we have 2 flavors, right? On-premise and cloud. And if we run on-premise, basically, I mean, that's an add-on which is installed in the SAP system of the customer, and they can really go ahead, basically. I mean, if you look into our map integration, we are partnering with Here Maps, which is one of the leading map vendor, basically. And in that particular case, we need to make an RFC connection to Here Map, basically, in order to make the travel calculation, to make the route optimization, and so on. That's to consider, but that's really not a big issue. If they go for the cloud solution, we also install an add-on in the customer's SAP system, which is then the connector to our cloud solution. There's not really much which you need to consider. I mean, what most customers really need to consider is that they have good data in their SAP system, right? In order to make the planning. So SAP data, that you have your order data, you have your technicians in SAP as personal master data sets. If you would like to use qualification, for example, in your planning process, you need to ensure that qualification is set up, right? So yeah, that's things you need to consider, right? And also authorizations, for example, that they are set up in SAP accordingly. But that's typical things which you have in every kind of SAP project. But there's not much requirements.
Okay. And final question from the audience is, does the solution recognize SAP roles for user types?
Does the solution recognize sub-roles for user types? I think it's pointing to the authorizations, right? I guess that part. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the solution is directly integrating into the authorization concept in SAP, right? What we typically have is a kind of dispatcher planner role, which contains all relevant authorizations which are needed in order to access orders, to edit orders, to change the orders. And what we typically do is, in a project, that we already provide that kind of information to our customers, so that they can ensure that they set up the role in a good way, and that they don't run into authorization issues.
Yeah, usually the planner has a lot more access to transactions than just the technician confirming the work. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
All right, that's all the time we have for questions. Thank you so much, Graham and Andre, for your leadership in today's discussion, and to all of our participants for your attention and your thoughtful questions. That's all the time we have for today. Don't forget to download our handout from the GoToWebinar panel, or if you're watching this later, in the YouTube description below. We know your time is valuable, and on behalf of the Engineering Industries Excellence team, I want to thank everyone for joining us. Have a great day. Goodbye.